So my name's Ray Morgan. I'm not sure if who knows me and who doesn't. I was actually here last year, and I spoke in the B track, but probably no one knew that because in the A track, Brendan Eich was talking. So I think I had 4 people, 5 people, and most of them were there just like talking about the previous talk. So, all right. So today I'm going to talk about app versus web. But before I do, I want to lay down a couple definitions of what I'm talking about when I'm saying app and web, just so that we're all on the same page here and we can all understand each other. So when I'm speaking about apps, I'm talking about native apps, written in usually a compiled language. And these are things like Objective-C apps or Java apps for Android. And when I'm talking about web, I'm talking about applications or web pages that are written in HTML, CS, and JavaScript. I'm not talking about web as a protocol for native apps, but actual web applications. So here's the 2 camps, and I thought this was interesting because this is one of those things that people are going to look back on us, and we're going to be known for killing terrorists and World of Warcraft. So I think that's awesome. But so the 2 camps here, this is actually on your left, we have a native app. This is the YouTube app, obviously. And on the right, we have the web application. So there's 2 very different ideas when it comes to what we should be doing. And you usually fall in either one of the other camps. The native app guys, they're like, oh, the web sucks, and you can't really do anything with it. It's limited. You can't get all the cool features of native stuff. And then on the other side, the web guys, we claim that we can do anything you guys can do, but better, faster, and we don't have to learn crazy languages and IDEs. So, once upon a time, I was a front-end developer. I worked for Zappos.com, and I've been doing front-end development there for about 4 years now, and really have a strong passion for web technologies. So when I first started, we were still using tables and stuff like that, and throughout the years, we've moved over to semantic stuff. And actually, I got an opportunity last year to start working on native apps. So I kind of was tinkering with Objective-C stuff, and so last August, I was approached. So I was like, "Hey, you want to work on the iPad app? We're going to work on an iPad app." And I said, sure. So I kind of have an interesting background, I think. I've been working a lot of front-end development, but I also do native app development. So I'm not fully on one side or the other. I think that there's a strong balance that we should be striking between the 2. And so the first app we worked on was the iPad app, and I had been tinkering with Objective-C for probably about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks prior to that. I have no idea why they let me do this. So it was me and one other guy that had some experience, so we kind of just started hacking on it. And we released the first version 8 weeks later. And this is a full shopping app where you can browse, search, view products, choose your size, width, color, check out, everything like that. And it was a native app for the iPhone. And at the same time, I just want to give a shout out to our one API developer. At the same time, we were making our Zappos API. So this whole thing was kind of a crazy rush to get it out. 8 weeks, we made a native app and a full API. So just if you're ever making an API for anyone, I highly recommend making a real app or real something with it, and don't just kind of think you know what your users are going to want. So the point of that story is that native apps aren't that hard to write. And this is kind of, I think, a hot topic where, as web developers, we think that this native platform is impossible, that we shouldn't even try, because why when we can just do web stuff? I've had people come up to me saying that they've been working on like these iPhone apps, and that was their first programming language. That was their first introduction to programming, was these iOS and Android apps. And one of the reasons that makes it really, really easy is all the documentation. The documentation, I don't know if anyone's ever Googled anything for like Objective-C. It's phenomenal. There's probably like hundreds of hours of videos, just the WWDC talks from last year, and then also the Stanford classes, and you Google anything and you get probably 27 or 30 Stack Overflow questions and answers, and it's great. And to demonstrate this, I'm actually going to try something I've never done before, and it's probably going to crash and burn, so I have a backup plan if it does. But I'm actually going to live code a Objective-C app, a really simple one. So let's see how this works. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. We'll figure that out later. OK, so how many here have actually written any kind of native apps, so Objective-C apps? We'll go with Objective-C first. Awesome, awesome. So maybe 40 people. What about like native Android apps, Java? About the same number. What about Windows mobile apps? 2. OK, we're good. All right. So if you haven't, if you've never done this, don't worry. It's not too scary. So I'm just going to create a new project. Xcode is a weird tool that is good and bad. You hate it and you love it. It's one of the things. So I'm just going to choose this, create a view base. A view base is just a very kind of, I don't know, doesn't really give you much by default. But all right. I guess I can't use the same name. There we go. All right. So it's going to set up a little structure, a little project structure for me. I don't have to really do that. So I got kind of two files here, which are the main kind of entry to the application, echo2 view controller .h and .m. And then I have this xlib file, or a nib, is what they used to be called. So if you've ever done C development, this is very similar. You have the header file and then the actual implementation file. Oh, right. Oh, man. I have no idea how to do that. Here, we'll just do it this way. How about that? I'll just code like this. Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, neither of those. That's what I'm used to. And oh, you know what? It's Xcode. See, this is what I'm talking about. They do things a little different. Let me go to fonts. Oh, wow, look at that. They have a theme just for this. Nice. That's awesome. All right, so here we go. We're just going to, let's do an IB. I'll kind of explain what some of this means as I go, and some I won't. So an IB outlet is IB stands for Interface Builder, which we'll explore in a little bit. IB outlet is just a way to hook into something that you build with Interface Builder. So IB outlet, let's just UI label. So we're gonna use a label. I'm just gonna call it label. We'll make 2 of these, but this one's gonna be a UI text field, not that. There we go. And this one's just gonna be called T field. All right, and then let me just copy this. So what I'm doing here is I'm just defining properties on this class. So the class is defined with the @interface directive, and I'm just defining properties that are in that class. So this one will have a label and a text field. These are just 2 variables. And then you also have to do this weird thing to kind of tell Objective-C to give you getters and setters so you can properly use these things. So I'm going to do non-atomic, retain. Just copy this. So non-atomic is just a keyword to whenever you change the property of label, anything about it, it'll make sure it's, or non-atomic will make sure it's not thread safe. Atomic will make it thread safe. Atomic is slower. You don't really use it too much in iOS development, maybe in Mac development, maybe in very specific places. And then one more thing I want to do is I want to add one function. And this same thing, IB action, it's kind of like outlets. Think of it as like an event listener. It allows you to hook up events. So this is going to be when a button is pressed. So on button press, and then UI button. Yeah, whatever. OK, so what I'm doing here is kind of defining the header of it. I know I did that wrong, backwards. Boom. OK. So I'm just defining that I will have a function called onButtonPress, and it returns the type IB action, which is actually null, but it's like a fancy keyword. And I'm going to get one argument to that function, and it's going to be the button that was pressed. And that's all I'm going to need to do in this file. So now I'm going to switch over to the implementation file. This is where all your actual code is. You'll see a bunch of stuff in there that doesn't that Apple auto generates, and most of it doesn't matter for us today. So I'm going to synthesize. Synthesize is this stupid thing you have to do that lets you, it like actually creates the getters and setters. I don't know why I have to do both at property and at synthesize. It's dumb. Let's see. So label and t fields. So this is just saying those from these guys, these properties here, this label and text field, I actually do want to use them. So do that. And one more thing, whenever you do an IB outlet, you also have to set them to nil on viewDid and unload for memory management. And these are just kind of things that you pick up really quick. These are kind of tedious little things, setting up variables. I wish it was just var, but compiled languages, statically type, what can you do? All right, so the last thing I'm going to do in this file, I'm just going to take this guy, I'm going to copy it over to wherever. So the class definition is kind of hard to see, but it's from this implementation down to this at end. They don't like, it's like weird C syntax mixed with Objective-C syntax. So the at signs are like this, or like that block right there. So the at implementation, and yeah. So I'm going to define this action right here, and all I want to do is whatever is in the text box, I want to put into the label. So I'm just going to do self.label.text. So that's the actual text property. So when I change that, the view will change, and the view is kind of like the element. And I want to set that equal to self.tfield.text. Simple enough. So take the text from the text field and put it into the text of the label. All right, so if we run it right now, everything is not done because we don't have any view. All we have is the code for the view. It'll actually compile, run, everything like that. We just don't have anything. I put the simulator down here for later. So yeah, we have an empty, gray, boring Objective-C app. So let's just jump into this nib, and I'm going to add, this loads, all right, I'm going to add a label, I'm going to add a button, I'm going to add a button, there it is, and I'm going to add that text field. Okay. And, oh, this is going so slow. All right, so now we have the elements on the screen. Just it types really slow. And so now all we need to do is kind of connect the pieces. So we have the elements, but they're not connected to those references. So when you push this button, it's not going to do anything. It's like as if you put a button element on an HTML page and didn't do any JavaScript. It's just going to be a button that you can press. It's not very exciting. So to hook up the stuff, all we have to do is magic clicking. So control dragging from what's called files owner, which is this weird name for the class, that view that we made, that Echo2 view controller. So I'm going to drag this down to the label. And it says, hey, here's an outlet. You can barely see it. It lists out all the outlets, those IB outlets that we made. And it already filters down to only the UI label outlets because you can't connect a text outlet to a label outlet and things like that because that would be weird. I'm going to do the same thing for text fields, and then also for the button press, go this way, so that when you press the button, we want to send the event of onButtonPress. So we set all that up already. We're just connecting it. And now, if everything went according to plan, we should have a really, really slow loading application. Oh, there we go. Hello, JSConf. And we press it, and there's the text. You'll notice it did something weird there. It made it small and ellipse, I don't know how to say that word. So let's make that a little bigger. So now when you run again, it'll actually work as expected. So now if we do hello JSConf, boom, hello JSConf. Thank you. Apple. So that's kind of a really basic intro to Objective-C programming. It's weird syntax, crazy weird syntax, but altogether it's not that hard. It takes maybe a little bit of ramp up, but there's a lot of good documentation on it and a lot of people that are interested in this. So you can probably find people to help you out and teach you some stuff. I highly recommend it. One of my big passions, besides front-end dev and like mobile dev, is just kind of looking into languages. And I highly recommend looking into some languages. If JavaScript is like your primary language, or if you've been using JavaScript and say Ruby, I would look into some other languages just to kind of see what else is out there and how they do things. I think it'll really help the community as a whole to see how other communities and other languages and frameworks work and how people have been doing these things. So, because like Objective-C and Mac development, they've been doing this forever, so we can probably learn a lot from them. All right, so that's that demo. Let's go back to here, see if I can. So yeah, native apps, they're not that hard. You could figure it out. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of overhead, but I think most people could figure it out. And the second point on that one is native apps are easy to get performant. And I think this is something we take for granted, is that when you're developing these native apps, they do so much for you for free when it comes to performance, when it comes to rendering speed, actions, like how long do things take to like run. And this isn't as big of a deal, I think, in the mobile web community. And it should be a lot bigger of a deal. So like one of the things, like I'm sure everyone's seen the Objectives, like a native app where it scrolls. I'm not sure if Android does this or if they're working on. I know they're working on a bunch of like GPU stuff in 2.3 and 3.0. But Apple does some really crazy stuff where they actually. So if you're scrolling, if you flick up and a cell moves off screen, they actually take it out of the rendering path. And they give you a chance to reuse it, so you can actually get like a handle to it and push it, and they'll push it onto the bottom of it. And so it's like this cycle that they do, and it's so that they don't have to do any kind of new object allocation. It's really, and you don't even have to worry about it. It's all under the hood, and it's actually kind of hard, especially with these newer phones and the new iPad. It's hard to make an app not get high frame rate. And when I'm saying high frame rate, I'm talking 60 frames a second. I'm not talking 30 frames a second. I'm talking 60 frames a second. So this is something that is really big. So this last year, after working, we released the iPad app, the iPhone app, and Android app, all within 5 months of each other. There's three of us working on it. And so at the end of the Android cycle, we were working on a mobile website. Our design resource at the time was kind of consumed by the Android platform and working on that. So, as being a high and mighty web dev, I decided that I would just, copy some of the stuff we're doing from the apps. We can do this. The mobile web's awesome. We can make this happen. So I started writing yet another micro framework that was more perfectly suited for my situations, and I like reinventing wheels. So we started working on this, and about 2 weeks into it, 2 or 3, I kind of have this breakdown. Because this mobile site, you're flipping through it, you're using it, it's cool, there's some stuff, but it's just wrong. It just feels like a crappy version of our iPhone app. And I don't want a crappy version of our iPhone app. I want a sweet mobile website. And so this brings me to the next point, and I want to really ask this question. Should mobile web really be trying to emulate native apps? And I think this is a very interesting topic and something that I think not everyone's really asking themselves. Like, why are we trying to emulate everything native apps are trying to do? Is that right? Does it feel right when you go to a website on your mobile phone and you end up going and it looks kind of like a native app, but not really? Like, how many of you had that experience where you get to a page and it's confusing or it's just frustrating because they tried so hard to make it native that it just doesn't work? And that could be anything from performance to just strange scrolling to just awkward design. And then the other thing is, it takes a lot of code to do that. I was writing this little micro framework, but it was still a lot of code. It was probably getting around 800 lines of code to do some of this stuff. And I just sat back and I was like, this is not the right path. Something as simple as a back button. We take a back button for granted in the browser, and sometimes we think that the back button is just to get you to the previous page. But it's not just to get you to the previous page. It does a lot more than that if you really take note of it. One thing is, if you scroll down and you hit back, you'll get back to that part of the page where you scrolled to. This is very important, and we actually had I'm going to call it a bug. It went live on Zappos a year or two ago, and in Firefox, it kind of busted that mentality, and it scrolled people to the top. So they'd be scrolling through searches, they click something, they hit back, and they'd be at the top. We got tons of complaints, and this is something that you might not think about, but it's a huge deal. And we don't get a lot of complaints when it comes to technical things, and that was really eye-opening. And another thing is, it doesn't just bring you back to the previous point in the page, because if that was all it was, we can solve this. But it also brings you back to the previous point in the page with the current state of that page. So if you ever use like a mobile website, take note of JavaScript that ran on that page. Go to the next page, hit the back button, and see what the state of the page is like. It actually captures a lot of what the current state is. And so this is something that's very hard, and you'd have to write a lot of custom code for your app. This is something a framework cannot handle because it would have to run very specific code for your app to get it back in the same state. And I just think it leads to a lot of broken expectations. What are you designing? Just as simple as, what are you designing for? Are you designing for an iPhone? Are you designing for an Android, Windows Mobile, which is even more different than both of them? Where do you put the back button? Do you put it at the top? Do you not put a back button? Because Android users don't like back buttons. They have a back button on the phone. Do you put the tab bar at the bottom? Do you put it at the top? All these things are each of these devices have very specific UI kind of mentalities and how they do things. And I think that's important that we try not to break these expectations of what these of these things. And if we're trying to emulate native apps, this is hard because they do things certain ways, and if we're trying to emulate all that, it's just not going to work. So this leads me to my main point here is, let's get back to the basics of the web. A lot of times as developers, we really want to try to do something awesome, right? We really want to push the envelope. And I think there's a place for that. I think there's a place for a lot of these tools. There was a few talks yesterday on them. They're absolutely have the world of respect for these guys, because I've been doing mobile web development for the last month, and man, I want to pull my hair out. It's ridiculous, some of these bugs that you have to deal with. And so they're trying to do these things, and I think if we just get back to the basics of what the web was all about, and what was that? What did it used to be? Semantic HTML. Whatever happened to that? Where's the notion that we should still be building semantic HTML websites? I think there is also a place for some of these crazy things, and I'm glad that Google and some other guys are kind of stepping up with some of these crazy hash bang specs. I don't know what your standpoint on that, but I think it's, at the very least, it allows us to do certain things that we weren't able to do before. So I think there's a place for them in that. But some of these things, they just, you write JavaScript and it just generates all your HTML. And while there's a place for that, and as you saw in the Objective-C, that's kind of how it is, it just feels wrong. And you have to learn a lot to be able to write in those frameworks. And I'd argue, why not just learn native app development if you're trying to make a native app? I understand you have to make 18 different devices, but you don't really. The next one is progressive enhancement. This is another one. Those sites that run like that, they're only going to run on the newest platforms. And with this one, I'm not saying you have to support everything. I don't think you do. You have to know your user base. So at Zappos, we're actually kind of lucky because we really only have two types of devices shopping on the mobile website, which is iPhone and Android. I think we had 6 BlackBerry requests last week, and I think I know the guy that was doing that because he bugs me about it every day. So you don't have to support everything. You just got to support. You have to support your users, but not all your iPhone users are on iPhone 4s. You know, not all your Android users have the latest and greatest Droid X2 or whatever. It's a very we as developers, we usually have some of these latest technologies, but if you don't test it on these older ones, you would see that things aren't all peachy and nice. So if you are thinking about using some of these all-in-one app things, I would really highly recommend actually finding someone with like an old iPhone, iPhone 2, iPhone 3, an Android that's not the latest one. Maybe it is the latest one, but it's just a low-cost one, and really try some of those things out on them because it's not always as performant as you would like, and sometimes it's borderline unusable. And that brings me to usability. I think this is a very, very important point. So when you're designing these things, what do you design for? As I said, iPhone or Android. But I think if we kind of abstract away from that, and we did this with kind of when kind of Web 2.0 was all catching on and everyone was going on that, we kind of started making these really heavily desktop-like apps. And I think we quickly realized that that is not what the web should be. We stopped doing that, and you get a lot of much simpler applications come out of that, and people are more used to certain mindsets when they're browsing on the mobile devices and when they're using the web. And so I think usability is an important point that we need to really keep this in mind. Usability is designed around making a usable app. And also simplicity. I really, really, really love simple things. Complicated things frustrate me a lot. And so if we go back to what the web was all about, it's all about some simple ideas. You know, links should be links. They should take you to pages. We shouldn't be trying to wrap this concept of the native app around this web model. And other things. Things such as A/B testing and Google Analytics. I'm sure most places want analytics on your pages. How do you do this with those type of things? You could probably do it, but you would have to write custom code for all of that stuff. You can't just drop it in like you used to be able to. So, yeah, that was that point. So that's kind of that part. Now I want to go into a quick demo of some of the stuff we've been doing, some other sites, and then jump into some kind of weird tricks and hacks and things that I've kind of learned doing some of this development. So let me go up here. I don't need you anymore. All right. So I'm going to go to the browser here. I wish I could bump the size of this one up. I don't think there is a way. All right, so let's go to the browser. So I want to show you a couple sites first off before I show you kind of like the new, what we're working on at Zappos. But Flickr is a very interesting one where I think they captured this notion of the web really well. It still uses some fancier tricks such as like the hash bang or hash minus the bang, but it still kind of captures what the web is about, and it allows the user to interact like it is a website. So here I'm just going to go to me. So if you haven't used this, it's really, really nice. So I'll go to this picture here. So if you can find that guy and give him a bear hug like that, you can win a Zappos fun bag. That's what I heard. So this is Ian C. Myers. He was leaving. We opened up a dev office in SF. And so that was John Bunch, the tallest guy at Zappos, giving Ian a hug. So yeah, I mean, it's super simple. It kind of interacts like you would think it would. It doesn't do a lot of crazy things. Now, I do have a lot of problems with this one as well, especially when it comes to the back button. They kind of break that model. Whereas, like, if I go here, I scroll down, I click on this guy right here, and then I'll hit back, and I'm at the top. I guess it's not as bad for them because there's not that many, but it's still not right. It frustrates people. It's just not what they're used to. Another example is Facebook. They do some cool touch stuff. They also do a lot of newer stuff, and so they, it's simple. It's not. They're not trying to emulate everything a native app is. They just kind of, they have a drop down here. It's pretty simple stuff. I like it. I don't actually use Facebook, but not much. So now I want to show you kind of what we've been working on. And it's going to be kind of slow because it's running on a dev build, going through a VPN and 2 layers of complexity. So this is what we're working on. I don't know if you've seen the current mobile website, and I hope you didn't think that was what this talk was about, because that thing is, I kind of hacked it together real quick. So this is the new mobile website here, and so I'm just going to do a search here. So you'll notice that we kind of keep the idea behind of Zappos and kind of just pulled it over. We did some really good. We have an awesome designer working on it. I think that's a huge thing, is we should have good designers helping us. So we have the search results here, and these buttons up here, which actually pull up a select box. So they're actually just select boxes kind of masked in this button form, and it works out absolutely beautifully because they get like this kind of what they're used to, and we don't have to implement that, because that would be a lot of work, and it would make it a lot of code, and we're, lazy developers are how it should be. So, filtering, this isn't styled yet, I apologize. And then, so paginating, so I'll go to page 4 here and go to product. So you can see it's very very simple, like a website. It doesn't feel like a mobile app, but we do things where where the browsers allow us. We do things that are interesting, such as the swiping. You could swipe through product images like you expect, and people actually expect that. Like if you give them this site, and we've done some user testing, and if you give them this this page like this, they'll flip through it automatically. It's not a strange concept to them. And so, and another thing is pinching and zooming. So we have large images on Zappos, and we wanted to really bring pinching and zooming to the device. And we could have implemented this in JavaScript with some crazy complexity, but it was actually the designer's idea, because he didn't think we could implement it in JavaScript, and we kind of butted heads on that for a second. But he actually came up with, hey, why don't we just go to the image? So we just linked to the image here, and you get native zooming, native scrolling, and it's actually brilliantly simple. And you could do that in other ways too, by just going to a web page that's not constrained by the scrolling or the zoom, if you wanted more features on that page. So yeah, that's kind of. I want to show you one more thing that I thought was pretty sweet. So I'm going to show you a little bit of code here. Let me bump this up and change the. Running out of time, but let me go to. Ew. What's the best one for the? That's not too bad. I'll just bump it up. All right. This block right here. I don't know if you've seen these app media queries in CSS, but they're actually really cool. So you can actually specify, like, hey, this is going to be only for specific devices, or not even specific devices, but specific qualities of a device. So in this case, the max width, or the min width, has to be 480 pixels. So it has to be 480 pixels before it's going to run that block. And the cool part is, if the page changes so that it is 480 pixels at some point, it will then apply that part of the style sheet. And 480 pixels is the rotation of an iPhone, and and most Androids are at least that. But the whole idea here is, so we have this, on the cart, we have this area where you have 3 buttons on the bottom and the subtotal of that item. But when you rotated it, we wanted it to kind of lay out slightly different. It looks very similar, but it's different because of how it has to be laid out. And it's hard to explain because it really makes a lot more sense on an Android device. So it's the way that the buttons were spaced before are different, and it's just so that we can get this like grid line in the middle. So yeah, so this block runs only when it's that size. I think that's really cool. Some other neat things, if you're ever working on mobile web stuff, there's these some of these CSS properties, such as WebKit appearance. You probably haven't seen it, or maybe you have. I kind of stumbled upon it by accident. It was one of the greatest things that happened to me. Basically, what it does is any kind of native feel of a UI element, so a button, a select box, it basically just removes it all and makes it like this white, boring button. But it's awesome because then you can just style it up as however you want. So on all selects and all buttons, we just kill all of the native styling, and then later down below, we add gradients and other background images to them to kind of give them the effect of an actual button. The other thing is WebKit text size adjust. It's a mouthful, but so when you rotate an iPhone or an Android, the browser automatically kind of changes the size of the text to kind of scale it to fit the page more. But when you're making a very specific app where you know the sizes and you're kind of relying on that, you don't want that effect, or things will break at weird points. And yeah, so that just turns it off. Also fantastic. There's one more in here that I wanted to. Which one was it? It was. Sorry, I'm going to grab my notes here. It was. Oh, WebKit user select. I don't know where I use that. WebKit. Oops. User. Oh, there it is. So user select. This is so that, that copy and paste dialog that pops up when you're clicking around. You can actually disable that with CSS. Apple gives a big warning on that page of don't do this on the body, because that would make people angry if they did want to copy and paste something. But for specific elements, it's actually really cool. So a button, because sometimes you press and you're thinking about it, you want to hold it for a second, and then a copy and paste dialog pops up. It's strange. So that's also a really cool one. And lastly, box sizing, which you can make it so it goes to IE6 rendering mode for an element, which sounds crazy, but it lets you put the border and the padding inside the element when it's laid out, and it allows you to do 50% width with a border, which is awesome. You could do that with the Flexbox stuff, but it's not supported fully in everything yet. So yeah, so that's pretty much all I had there. So I don't know if I have time for questions. Oh yeah, we're hiring. I have to say that, I think. We're hiring for a lot of stuff, so pretty much if you're into anything, from front-end development, back-end development, mobile stuff, sys engineering, call center, whatever. Yeah, so if I have time for questions, I'd like to kind of field a couple questions. So the question, I'll repeat it because you're in here, is for media queries, there's a lot of discussion on that, and should we use, so for the mobile stuff, it works out, but should we be using it on our main site to make the main site, so if you go to this site, it will just use media queries to make it a mobile site. And I think that really depends on your what you're going for. The Zappos mobile website is very different than the website, so it wouldn't have worked out. Some of the information is different. We don't push everything down. Some of the features that aren't really required for the mobile experience. So it wouldn't have worked out for us. But if you have certain things, I think a good example would be any kind of content site, like a blog or anything like that. I think that's a perfect idea. I actually don't know all the debates on that, and so it works. It's cool, I guess. That's all I care about. So, yeah, and so the comment was why limit this discussion of app versus or the native app feel to mobile. Why not also desktop browser? And I think that's an excellent point. And I wouldn't. I think that's a great argument to be made on the desktop platform as well. I think it's been something that we've been struggling with for a while. I just don't have the qualifications, I guess, to argue that. So I'm going to argue what I've been working on. And but yeah, I think that's an awesome point, and I fully support that. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you.
Country roads take me home to the place I belong. Portland, Oregon, the JSConf. Country roads take me home.